The morning fog hung low over the small town of Cedar Falls, Oregon, wrapping itself around the ancient pine trees like a protective blanket. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where secrets were hard to keep, and where the logging industry had been the heartbeat of the community for over 100 years. The year was 2019, and autumn had painted the surrounding forests in shades of amber, crimson, and gold. Marcus Thompson wiped the sweat from his brow as he loaded his chainsaw into the back of his weathered pickup truck. At 42 years old, he had spent more than half his life working in these forests, his hands calloused and strong from decades of honest labor. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with deep lines around his eyes that spoke of both hardship and laughter. He was a man of few words but enormous heart, respected by every logger in the Pacific Northwest. The local diner, Rosie's Place, sat at the corner of Main Street and Timber Road, its neon sign flickering in the early morning darkness. It was 6:30 in the morning, and the parking lot was already filling up with mud-splattered trucks belonging to the men and women who made their living from the forest. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee drifted through the crisp autumn air, mixing with the ever-present scent of pine. Marcus pushed open the glass door, the familiar bell announcing his arrival. The warmth inside was a welcome contrast to the 40-degree temperature outside. He nodded to the faces he had known for years, men with beards and flannel shirts, women with strong arms and stronger spirits. This was his family, his community, the people who would give you the shirt off their back without a second thought. He took his usual seat at the counter, and before he could even speak, Rosie herself placed a steaming cup of black coffee in front of him. She was 63 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, and eyes that had seen everything this town had to offer. "Morning, Marcus," she said with a warm smile. "The usual?" "You know me too well, Rosie." She chuckled and disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Marcus to his thoughts. Through the window, he watched the town slowly come to life. Shop owners swept their sidewalks, parents drove their children to school, and the old men gathered on the bench outside the hardware store, ready for another day of solving the world's problems. But there was one thing Marcus noticed that morning that he had never noticed before. Across the street, standing alone at the bus stop, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, with tangled brown hair that fell past her thin shoulders. She was wearing a coat that was at least 2 sizes too big for her, and she stood with her shoulders hunched, her eyes fixed on the ground. Something about the way she stood made Marcus's heart clench. There was a vulnerability to her, a smallness that had nothing to do with her physical size. She looked like a child who was trying to make herself invisible. Before you continue watching this story, I want to ask you something. If stories like this one touch your heart and remind you of the goodness that still exists in this world, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring more of these powerful stories to light, stories that celebrate the strength of community and the resilience of the human spirit. Now, let's continue. The school bus arrived with a squeal of brakes, and the little girl climbed aboard without looking back. Marcus watched until the bus disappeared around the corner, then turned back to his breakfast, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. His friend and fellow logger, Danny Rodriguez, slid onto the stool next to him. Danny was 35, with a quick smile and an even quicker wit. He had worked alongside Marcus for the past 12 years, and they had become as close as brothers. "You see something interesting out there?" Danny asked, following Marcus's gaze to the now empty bus stop. "Just a kid waiting for the bus." Danny shrugged and ordered his own breakfast. The conversation turned to work, to the section of forest they would be clearing that day, to the weather forecast that promised rain by afternoon. But even as Marcus engaged in the familiar banter, his mind kept returning to that little girl and the way she had stood there, so alone, so small against the world. The workday was long and hard, as it always was. Marcus and his crew of 12 men worked deep in the forest, the sound of chainsaws echoing through the trees. There was a rhythm to the work, a dance between man and nature that Marcus had come to love over the years. Each tree they felled was done with respect, with an understanding of the forest's importance and the responsibility they had to maintain it. By late afternoon, the promised rain had arrived, a steady drizzle that turned the forest floor into a muddy challenge. The men packed up their equipment and headed back to town, their trucks forming a caravan along the winding mountain road. As they passed through the residential area on the outskirts of Cedar Falls, Marcus found himself slowing down. Without quite knowing why, he turned onto Maple Street, a road lined with modest homes that had seen better days. And there, in front of a house with peeling paint and an overgrown lawn, he saw her again. The little girl was sitting on the front porch, her knees pulled up to her chest, her oversized coat wrapped around her like a cocoon. The rain was falling steadily now, and although the porch provided some shelter, she was clearly cold. Marcus could see her shivering from the road. He pulled his truck to a stop and rolled down his window. "Hey there," he called out, his voice gentle. "You okay?" The girl looked up, and for the first time, Marcus got a clear look at her face. What he saw made his blood run cold. There was a bruise on her left cheek, dark purple fading to yellow at the edges. Another bruise was visible on her forearm, where her sleeve had ridden up. But it was her eyes that hit him the hardest, eyes that were far too old for such a young face, eyes that held a mixture of fear and desperate hope. She didn't answer his question. Instead, she simply stared at him, as if trying to decide whether he was a threat or a savior. Marcus turned off his engine and stepped out of the truck, moving slowly so as not to frighten her. The rain soaked through his flannel shirt, but he barely noticed. He walked up the cracked concrete path and stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, maintaining a respectful distance. "My name's Marcus," he said quietly. "I'm a logger. I work up in the mountains. What's your name?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then, in a voice so soft he almost missed it, she whispered, "Emma." "That's a beautiful name, Emma. Are your parents home?" Something flickered in her eyes, something that looked a lot like fear. She shook her head slowly. "Is there someone taking care of you? A grandparent, an aunt or uncle?" Again she shook her head. Marcus felt his heart breaking piece by piece. He had no children of his own, a fact that had always left a hollow space in his chest. His wife, Sarah, had passed away from cancer 8 years ago, and he had never remarried. But standing here, looking at this frightened little girl, he felt something stir inside him, a protective instinct so fierce it took his breath away. "Emma," he said gently, "how did you get those bruises?" She pulled her coat tighter around herself and looked away. The rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Then, so quietly that Marcus had to lean closer to hear, Emma whispered 2 words that would change everything. "Protect me." Those 2 words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He had to grip the porch railing to steady himself. In his 42 years of life, he had faced down falling trees, survived logging accidents, and weathered the devastating loss of his wife. But nothing had ever shaken him to his core like those 2 simple words from a child who should have been playing with dolls and dreaming about birthday parties. "Emma," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I need you to tell me what's happening. I want to help you, but I need to understand." Before she could answer, the front door of the house swung open with a bang. A man stood in the doorway, tall and thin, with bloodshot eyes and several days' worth of stubble on his gaunt face. He reeked of alcohol, even from where Marcus stood, and there was a meanness to him that Marcus recognized immediately. He had seen it before in men who took out their failures on those weaker than themselves. "Who the hell are you?" the man demanded, his words slurred. "Get off my property!" Marcus straightened to his full height. At 6'3" and 220 pounds of solid muscle, he was an imposing figure. But he kept his voice calm, controlled. "I was just checking on your daughter. She looked like she might need some help." "She don't need nothing from you. Emma, get inside." The little girl scrambled to her feet and hurried into the house, casting one last desperate look at Marcus before the door slammed shut behind her. Marcus stood in the rain for a long moment, his fists clenched at his sides. Every instinct he had was screaming at him to break down that door and take Emma away from that house. But he knew that acting rashly could make things worse for her. He needed to be smart about this. He walked back to his truck, his mind racing. As he drove through the rain-soaked streets of Cedar Falls, he made a decision. He would not let this go. He would not let that little girl down. The next morning, Marcus was at the police station before it even opened. Chief Barbara Hendricks was a woman in her 50s with short grey hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She had been the chief of police in Cedar Falls for the past 15 years, and she knew every family in town, including their secrets. "Marcus Thompson," she said with surprise as she unlocked the station door. "What brings you here at this hour?" Marcus told her everything, about seeing Emma at the bus stop, about the bruises, about the drunken man and the fear in Emma's eyes. As he spoke, he watched the chief's expression shift from curiosity to concern to barely contained anger. "That would be Wayne Gibson," she said when Marcus finished. "He moved here about 2 years ago with his daughter. Wife died in a car accident, from what I heard. He works at the mill when he's sober enough to show up, which isn't often anymore." "Those bruises didn't come from falling off a bike, Chief." Barbara sighed heavily. "I know, Marcus, I know. But without concrete evidence, without Emma making a statement, my hands are tied. I can do a welfare check, but if Wayne denies everything and Emma is too scared to talk, there's only so much I can do." "So we just let her keep getting hurt?" "That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we need to be strategic. I'll send someone over today for the welfare check. I'll also contact Child Protective Services. But Marcus, these things take time. The system is slow, and it's imperfect." Marcus left the police station feeling frustrated and helpless. He understood the constraints the chief was working under, but understanding didn't make it any easier to accept. That little girl was in danger, and every day that passed was another day she might be hurt. He went to work that day, but his mind wasn't on the trees. Danny noticed immediately. "You've been somewhere else all morning," Danny said during their lunch break. "What's going on?" Marcus told him about Emma. As the story spilled out, he saw his own horror reflected in Danny's eyes. "That's messed up, man. That's really messed up. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not going to just stand by and watch." Word spread quickly among the logging crew. By the end of the day, every man on Marcus's team knew about the little girl with the bruises and the whispered plea for protection. And to a man, they wanted to help. "We could go over there," suggested Big Pete, a massive man with a heart of gold. "Show this Wayne character what happens to people who hurt kids in our town." "That'll just land us in jail and make things worse for Emma," Marcus said, though he couldn't deny the appeal of the idea. "We need to do this the right way." "And what's the right way?" asked Tommy Hawkins, the youngest member of the crew at 23. Marcus thought for a moment. "We make sure that little girl knows she's not alone. We make sure the whole town knows what's happening. We put so many eyes on that house that Wayne Gibson can't make a move without someone seeing it, and we put pressure on the system to do its job." The plan came together over the next few days. Marcus and his crew started driving past Emma's house at all hours, making their presence known. They weren't threatening, they weren't aggressive. They were just there, a visible reminder that the community was watching. Rosie started sending food home with Emma when the girl stopped by the diner after school, which she had started doing since that rainy afternoon when Marcus first spoke to her. The old men on the bench outside the hardware store made a point of waving to her every morning as she waited for the bus. The teachers at her school, alerted by concerned community members, began documenting their observations and reporting to CPS. But it was a conversation Marcus had with Emma one afternoon that gave him the idea that would change everything. He had stopped by the diner after work, hoping to see her, and found her sitting at the counter with a glass of milk and a piece of pie that Rosie had insisted she eat. "Hey, Emma," he said, taking the stool next to her. "How was school today?" She shrugged, a gesture he had come to recognize as her default response. But then she looked up at him with those two old eyes and asked a question that broke his heart all over again. "Why do you care?" Marcus took a moment to compose himself before answering. "Because everyone deserves to be cared about, Emma, especially kids, and especially you." "Nobody else cares." "That's not true. A lot of people in this town care about you. They're just trying to figure out how to help." Emma was quiet for a moment, picking at her pie with her fork. Then she said something that would stay with Marcus for the rest of his life. "When I was little, before my mom died, she used to tell me that guardian angels were real. She said they were big and strong, and they would always protect me if I ever needed them. I used to believe her. But then she died, and I stopped believing in anything." She looked up at Marcus, and for just a moment, her guard dropped completely. "But then I saw you that day, sitting in your truck, and I thought, maybe she was right. Maybe guardian angels are real. Maybe they just look like regular people." Marcus had to swallow hard against the lump in his throat. "Emma, I don't know about angels, but I do know this. There are 43 men and women on my logging crew. 43 people who work hard every day, who have families of their own, who know the difference between right and wrong, and every single one of them is watching out for you now. We're not angels, but we're not going to let anyone hurt you, not if we can help it." Emma's eyes widened. 43 people for me? For you. That night, Marcus called a meeting at his house. His crew showed up in full, along with several other community members who had heard about Emma's situation. In total, 40 people crowded into Marcus's living room, united by a common purpose. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this," Marcus said, standing before them. "Emma Gibson is a 7-year-old girl who is being abused by her father. We all know it. The police know it. CPS knows it. But the system is slow, and while we wait for it to work, she's in danger." "So what do?" someone asked from the back of the room. "We make our presence known. We show up at that house every day and let Wayne Gibson know that we're watching. We're not going to threaten him. We're not going to break any laws. But we're going to make damn sure he knows that if he lays another hand on that little girl, every logger in this county is going to know about it." There was a murmur of agreement throughout the room. "But we also need to help Emma in other ways. She needs stability. She needs to know that there are adults she can trust. Rosie, you've been feeding her at the diner. Can you keep that up?" Rosie nodded firmly. "That child will never go hungry as long as I'm alive." "Good. Mrs. Patterson, you're a retired teacher. Would you be willing to tutor Emma after school, help her catch up on what she's been missing?" Dorothy Patterson, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, smiled. "It would be my honor." "Danny, I want you to coordinate with the crew. Set up a schedule of drive-bys. I want eyes on that house around the clock." Danny nodded. "Consider it done." Marcus looked around the room at the faces of his friends and neighbors, these hard-working people who had come together for one little girl. "We're not vigilantes," he said. "We're a community, and communities take care of their own." The next morning, the convoy of pickup trucks that drove past Emma's house numbered 17. They drove slowly, deliberately, their engines rumbling like the throats of protective beasts. Inside the house, Wayne Gibson watched from the window, his face pale. This continued every day for the next 2 weeks. Sometimes it was a handful of trucks, sometimes it was a dozen. But there was always someone there, watching, waiting. Emma noticed too. Marcus saw the change in her gradually, a slight straightening of her shoulders, a new light in her eyes. She still carried the weight of her situation, but she no longer carried it alone. At school, her teachers reported that she was beginning to participate in class, something she had never done before. She was making friends, tentative friendships built on the foundation of her growing confidence. And every day after school, she went to Rosie's diner, where there was always a warm meal waiting for her and people who were happy to see her. But Wayne Gibson was not the kind of man to back down easily. The presence of the loggers angered him, fed his paranoia, made him feel cornered. And cornered animals are dangerous. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Marcus was at home cooking dinner when his phone rang. It was Danny, and his voice was urgent. "Marcus, you need to get over to the Gibson house right now. Something's happening." Marcus didn't ask questions. He grabbed his keys and was in his truck in seconds. When he arrived at Maple Street, he found a scene that made his blood boil. Wayne Gibson was standing on his front porch, shouting at a group of loggers who had gathered on the sidewalk. He had a baseball bat in his hands, and he was waving it wildly. "I told you people to leave me alone," Wayne screamed. "This is harassment. I'll call the cops." "Go ahead and call them," Big Pete shouted back. "We're on public property." Marcus pushed through the crowd and held up his hands. "Everyone calm down. Pete, back off. Wayne, put down the bat." Wayne's bloodshot eyes fixed on Marcus. You're the one who started all this. You turned this whole damn town against me." "Wayne, we just want to make sure Emma is safe, that's all." "She's my daughter, mine, and what happens in my house is none of your business." "It becomes our business when a child is being hurt." Something shifted in Wayne's face, a crack in the mask of bravado. For just a moment, Marcus saw something else there, something that looked almost like despair. "You don't know anything," Wayne said, his voice suddenly quiet. "You don't know what it's like. You don't know what I've been through." "Then tell me." The crowd had gone silent. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. Wayne stood on his porch, the bat lowering slowly, his shoulders beginning to shake. "My wife," he said, his voice breaking. "Sarah. She was everything to me, everything, and then she was just gone. Some drunk driver ran a red light, and she was gone. And I was left with Emma, and I didn't know how to be a father without her." He sank down onto the porch steps, the bat falling from his hands. "I started drinking to forget, but I couldn't forget. I could never forget. And sometimes, when I look at Emma, I see Sarah's eyes looking back at me, and it hurts so much I can't stand it." Marcus felt something shift inside him. He understood loss. He understood the way grief could twist a person, could make them unrecognizable to themselves. His own wife had been named Sarah, too. He knew the darkness that came after losing her. But understanding didn't excuse what Wayne had done. It didn't erase the bruises on Emma's body or the fear in her eyes. "Wayne," Marcus said, moving closer, "I know what it's like to lose someone you love. My wife died 8 years ago. Cancer. And for a long time I was lost too. I understand the pain you're in. But Emma is not the cause of your pain. She's a child who lost her mother and needs her father to protect her, not hurt her." Wayne looked up, tears streaming down his face. "I know," he whispered. "God help me, I know. But I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to be the father she needs." "Then let us help you." The words surprised even Marcus. Around him he heard murmurs from the crowd, some of confusion, some of disagreement. But he pressed on. This town takes care of its own, Wayne. That includes Emma, but it can include you, too. If you're willing to get help, to really get help, we'll support you. But you have to make that choice, and you have to make it now. Wayne was silent for a long moment. The evening light was fading, casting long shadows across the overgrown lawn. Inside the house, Marcus could see Emma's face at the window, watching everything. Finally, Wayne spoke. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll go to rehab. I'll go to therapy, whatever it takes. I can't lose her too. She's all I have left of Sarah." What happened next surprised everyone. Chief Barbara Hendricks, who had arrived during the confrontation, stepped forward. "Wayne Gibson," she said, her voice firm but not unkind, "I'm going to need you to come with me. We're going to get you the help you need. And while you're getting that help, Emma is going to stay with a foster family here in Cedar Falls, a family that's been vetted and approved. You're going to have to earn the right to be her father again, and it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. But if you're serious about changing, this community will be behind you." Wayne nodded slowly, his face a mask of exhaustion and something that might have been relief. He stood up on shaky legs and allowed the chief to lead him to her patrol car. But before they reached the car, Emma came running out of the house. "Daddy!" she cried, her voice high and frightened. Wayne turned, and for a moment, father and daughter stood facing each other. Then Wayne knelt down and opened his arms, and Emma ran into them. "I'm sorry, baby girl," Wayne sobbed into her hair. "I'm so sorry for everything. I'm going to get better, I promise. I'm going to be the daddy you deserve." Emma pulled back and looked at him with those two old eyes. "You promise?" "I promise." She hugged him again, and then she did something that made Marcus's heart swell. She let go of her father and walked over to where Marcus stood with his crew. She looked up at him with an expression that was part gratitude, part wonder. "You kept your promise," she said. "You protected me." Marcus knelt down, so he was at her eye level. "We all did, Emma, every single person here, and we're going to keep protecting you no matter what." She hesitated for just a moment, and then she threw her arms around his neck. Marcus hugged her back, this little girl who had asked a stranger for protection and found an army instead. The next few months were a time of transition and healing for everyone in Cedar Falls. Wayne Gibson checked himself into a rehabilitation facility 2 hours away. The program was intensive, 6 months of inpatient treatment followed by extensive outpatient support. It was expensive, but the community rallied. Rosie organized a fundraiser at her diner. The logging companies donated money. Even people who had been ready to run Wayne out of town on a rail contributed, because this was what communities did. They gave people the chance to change. Emma, meanwhile, was placed with the Patterson family. Dorothy Patterson and her husband Harold had raised 4 children of their own and had been foster parents for 20 years. Their home was warm and loving, filled with books and laughter and the smell of fresh-baked cookies. At first, Emma was wary. She had learned to be cautious of adults, to expect disappointment and pain. But Dorothy and Harold were patient. They gave her space when she needed it and comfort when she was ready for it. They enrolled her in art classes, where she discovered a talent for drawing. They read her stories at bedtime and listened to her talk about her day. And Marcus became a constant presence in her life. Every Saturday, he picked her up from the Patterson house and took her on what he called adventure days. Sometimes they went hiking in the mountains he knew so well. Sometimes they visited the logging site where Emma was fascinated by the machinery and the teamwork of the crew. Sometimes they just went to Rosie's diner and talked over pancakes. Through these outings, Marcus began to share stories about his own wife, Sarah. He told Emma about how they had met at a county fair, how she had beaten him at ring toss 3 times in a row, and then agreed to let him buy her a corn dog as consolation. He told her about their wedding day, a simple ceremony in the forest clearing that Marcus loved most, surrounded by friends and the towering pines. He told her about the way Sarah could make anyone feel special, the way her laugh could fill a room, the way she had fought her cancer with a grace and courage that still amazed him. "Your mom and my wife had the same name," Marcus said one Saturday as they sat on a fallen log, looking out over a valley painted in autumn colors. "Maybe that's not a coincidence. Maybe there's something special about Sarah's." Emma considered this seriously. "My mom used to make the best chocolate chip cookies. She always put extra chocolate chips in mine because she knew I liked it." "That sounds like something my Sarah would have done too." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the wind in the trees. Then Emma said, "Do you think they're together somewhere, our Sarahs?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. "I'd like to think so, sweetheart. I'd like to think they're up there somewhere, looking down on us, proud of how we're taking care of each other." Emma leaned against his arm. "I think so too." As the weeks turned into months, Emma began to blossom. Her teachers marveled at her transformation. The withdrawn, frightened child who had barely spoken in class was now raising her hand, answering questions, even making jokes with her classmates. Her drawings, which she had started sharing with Dorothy, revealed a rich inner life. Images of forests and mountains, of people with kind faces, of a future she was beginning to believe in. But there was still the question of her father. Wayne's rehabilitation was going well, according to his counselors. He was addressing his alcoholism and the underlying depression that had fueled it. He was learning healthy coping mechanisms, working through his grief, and preparing to be the father Emma needed. Emma had mixed feelings about this. Part of her missed her daddy, the real daddy he had been before her mother died. But part of her was afraid that he would go back to the way he was, afraid that the nightmare would start all over again. Marcus helped her navigate these complicated emotions. "It's okay to be scared," he told her. "It's okay to be angry and confused and everything else you're feeling. These are big feelings, and they're all valid." "But what if he hurts me again?" "Then we'll be here, all of us. We'll protect you just like we did before. But Emma, people can change. Not everyone does, but some people do. And from everything I'm hearing, your dad is really trying. That doesn't mean you have to forgive him right away. It doesn't mean you have to trust him right away. But maybe, just maybe, you can give him the chance to show you he's different." The supervised visits began when Emma had been with the Pattersons for 4 months. At first, they were held at the CPS office in town, with a social worker present. Wayne looked different, healthier, more present. His eyes were clear, and when he looked at Emma, there was none of the darkness that had been there before. "Hey, Bug," he said softly, using the nickname he had given her when she was a baby. "I've missed you so much." Emma approached cautiously, but she didn't pull away when he hugged her. "I missed you too, Daddy." They spent an hour together, playing board games and talking about school and her art classes. Wayne listened with genuine interest, asked questions, engaged with her in a way he hadn't in years. When the visit was over, Emma hugged him again, and this time she held on a little longer. "He seemed different," she told Marcus that Saturday, "like how he used to be before." "How did that make you feel?" She thought about it, hopeful, I think, but also scared. What if it doesn't last? Then we deal with that if and when it happens. But right now, in this moment, it's okay to feel hopeful. It's okay to believe that things can get better. The visits continued, gradually becoming longer and less supervised. By the time Wayne completed his inpatient program and moved into a small apartment in Cedar Falls, Emma was spending entire weekends with him. The community watched carefully, ready to intervene if necessary, but what they saw was a man who was genuinely committed to being a better father. It wasn't perfect. Wayne still had bad days, days when the grief hit him hard, when the temptation to drink was almost overwhelming. But he had tools now, coping mechanisms, and a support system. He attended AA meetings religiously. He saw a therapist twice a week. And whenever he felt himself slipping, He called Marcus, or one of the other loggers, who would come over and sit with him until the crisis passed. The logging community had embraced Wayne in a way no one, least of all Wayne himself, had expected. These were men who had wanted to run him out of town just months earlier, and now they were showing up at his door with casseroles and invitations to poker night. It was Marcus who had set the tone, Marcus who had reminded them that redemption was possible, that their job wasn't just to protect Emma, but to help create a world where she could thrive. "I don't deserve any of this," Wayne said one evening, sitting on Marcus's porch as they watched the sunset. "After everything I did, I don't deserve kindness." "Maybe not," Marcus said honestly, "but kindness isn't about what people deserve. It's about what they need, and you needed a second chance. We all do at some point or another." Wayne was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm never going to be able to thank you enough for saving Emma, for saving me. You don't need to thank me. Just be the father she deserves. That's all the thanks I need." 1 year after the night when 40 loggers had shown up at Emma's house, the town of Cedar Falls held a celebration. It was called Community Day, and it was meant to honor the spirit of togetherness that had defined the town for over a century. There were games and food and music in the park at the center of town. Rosie set up a booth serving her famous pie. The logging crews competed in axe-throwing and log-rolling contests. Children ran through the grass, their laughter rising into the clear autumn air. Emma was among them, running and playing like any other carefree child. Her hair was clean and brushed, her clothes fit properly, and there wasn't a bruise to be seen on her. She had grown in the past year, both physically and emotionally, and the transformation was remarkable. At one point, she broke away from her friends and ran over to where Marcus was standing with his crew. "Marcus, come push me on the swings." He laughed and allowed her to drag him to the swing set. As he pushed her higher and higher, her delighted squeals filling the air, he felt a sense of peace that he hadn't known since before his Sarah had died. "Higher!" Emma shouted. "I want to touch the sky!" "Oh, you're going to fly right off," he called back, laughing. "Then I'll have wings." He watched her swing through the air, this little girl who had asked a stranger to protect her, and he marveled at the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, she had been a frightened child with bruises on her body and shadows in her eyes. Now she was flying, reaching for the sky, believing that she could touch it. Later that afternoon, there was a ceremony on the bandstand. Mayor Jennifer Carlson, a former logger herself, took the microphone and addressed the crowd. "We're here today to celebrate what makes Cedar Falls special," she said. "And that's not our trees, although they are magnificent. It's not our history, although it is rich. It's our people. It's the way we come together when one of our own is in need. It's the way we refuse to look the other way when something is wrong. It's the way we believe in second chances and in the power of community to change lives." She paused, her eyes finding Marcus in the crowd. "I want to tell you a story. A year ago, a man named Marcus Thompson saw a little girl standing alone at a bus stop. He noticed that she looked frightened, that she had bruises on her arms, that something wasn't right. Now, most people might have noticed these things and then gone about their day. But Marcus isn't most people. He stopped. He asked if she was okay, and when she whispered 2 words, "Protect me," he did something remarkable. He mobilized an entire community to help her. There was a murmur in the crowd, people nodding, remembering. Within days, 40 loggers from our town were driving past that little girl's house every day, making sure she was safe. They weren't vigilantes. They weren't looking for trouble. They were simply saying, with their presence, "We see you, and we will not let you suffer alone." She smiled, her eyes glistening. That little girl's name is Emma Gibson, and today she is thriving. She's at the top of her class. She has friends who adore her. She has a father who, with the support of this community, has overcome his own demons and become the parent she deserves. And she has an entire town that loves her. Mayor Carlson gestured to the side of the stage. "Emma, would you come up here, please?" Emma made her way through the crowd, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment and pride. She climbed the steps to the bandstand and stood beside the mayor. "Emma, is there anything you'd like to say?" Emma looked out at the crowd, at the faces of the people who had become her extended family. She took a deep breath. "When my mom died," she said, her voice small but clear, "I thought I was all alone. My daddy was sad, and sometimes he did things that scared me. I didn't think anyone could help. But then I met Marcus, and he didn't just help me. He brought all of you with him." She paused, her eyes finding Marcus in the crowd. "In school, we learned about guardian angels. I always thought they had wings and lived in the sky, but now I know that's not true. Guardian angels are regular people who choose to be brave. They're people who see someone who needs help and don't look away. They're people like all of you." Her voice trembled slightly as she continued. "I used to be scared all the time. I used to think that bad things would always happen to me. But now I know that no matter what happens, I'm not alone. I have a whole town full of guardian angels watching over me, and I just want to say thank you for protecting me." The applause that followed was thunderous. People were crying openly, hugging each other, wiping their eyes. Emma ran off the stage and straight into Marcus's arms, and he held her tight. This little girl who had changed his life as much as he had changed hers. After the ceremony, Wayne approached Marcus. He looked nervous, his hands twisting together. "Marcus, I need to say something." "Go ahead." Wayne took a deep breath. "A year ago, you could have just called the cops and walked away, or you could have punched my lights out and nobody would have blamed you, but instead, you offered me a chance. You saw past my mistakes to the person I could be. You helped me find the strength to become that person." He extended his hand. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that chance, and I want you to know that Emma thinks of you as family. So do I. You will always, always have a place in our lives." Marcus shook his hand and then, surprising both of them, pulled Wayne into a hug. "That's what community is about, Wayne. We lift each other up, all of us." As the sun began to set over Cedar Falls, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, the town gathered for one final event. Marcus and his crew had built a special installation in the park, a wooden sculpture of a pine tree surrounded by 40 smaller trees, carved by hand from the logs of the forest they loved. At the base of the largest tree, a bronze plaque read, "In honor of the Cedar Falls guardian angels, 40 ordinary people who answered one little girl's call for help and reminded us all what community means." Emma was invited to place the final element, a small wooden angel, carved by Marcus himself, at the top of the largest tree. Danny lifted her onto his shoulders and she reached up, stretching as high as she could, until she slotted the angel into place. "There," she said with satisfaction, "now she can watch over everyone." The crowd cheered, and somewhere in the forest a woodpecker began its rhythmic drumming, as if nature itself was applauding. That night, after the festivities had wound down and the families had gone home, Marcus sat on his porch, looking up at the stars. The night was clear and cold, the kind of night that made him feel small and significant at the same time. His phone buzzed with a text from Emma, who had gotten her own phone for her birthday. It was a picture she had drawn, a stick-figure man surrounded by trees, with the caption, "My guardian angel. I love you, Marcus." He smiled, his heart full to bursting. A year ago he had been a lonely man, going through the motions of life, still grieving a loss that had never fully healed. Then a little girl had whispered 2 words, and everything had changed. He had learned that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant finding new reasons to live, new people to love, new purposes to pursue. He had learned that strength wasn't about doing things alone. It was about letting others in, building connections, creating a community that could weather any storm. And he had learned that heroes weren't the people in capes and costumes. They were the ordinary folks who chose to do the right thing, even when it was hard. They were the neighbors who brought casseroles, the teachers who stayed late, the loggers who drove their trucks past a little girl's house just to let her know she wasn't alone. They were the 40 people who answered a whispered plea for protection and proved that sometimes, just sometimes, humanity could be extraordinary. 3 years later, Emma stood on the stage of her middle school auditorium, accepting an award for her community service project. At 12 years old, she had started a program called Guardian Angels, which trained teenagers to recognize and report signs of child abuse. I started this program because I know what it feels like to be a kid who needs help and doesn't know how to ask for it, she said, her voice strong and confident. I was lucky. I found people who listened, who saw me, who didn't look away. But not every kid is that lucky. So I want to make sure that there are guardian angels in every school, in every neighborhood, in every community. Because every child deserves to feel safe. Every child deserves to be protected. In the audience, Marcus wiped his eyes unashamedly. Beside him, Wayne squeezed his shoulder. "That's our girl," Wayne whispered. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "That's our girl." After the ceremony, Emma found them in the crowd. She threw her arms around Marcus first, then her father. "Are you proud of me?" she asked, the little girl she had been peeking out from behind the confident young woman she was becoming. "Prouder than I could ever put into words," Marcus said. They walked out of the auditorium together, Emma in the middle, holding hands with both men. The sun was setting over Cedar Falls, and the town looked as beautiful as it ever had. The mountains rising majestically in the distance, the forests a tapestry of green and gold. "Hey, Marcus," Emma said as they reached his truck. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Remember that day when you found me on the porch, when I asked you to protect me? I'll never forget it." She smiled, that brilliant smile that lit up every room she entered. "Thank you for listening. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for not walking away." Marcus hugged her tight. "Thank you for letting me in, Emma. You saved me as much as I saved you." They stood there for a moment, the three of them bound together by a history of pain and redemption, of community and love. The past could not be erased, but it had been transformed into something beautiful, something meaningful, something that would ripple outward for generations to come. Because that's what happens when ordinary people choose to be extraordinary. That's what happens when a community decides that no child will suffer alone. That's what happens when 40 loggers answer a whispered plea and prove that guardian angels are real. They're not in the sky. They're not wearing wings. They're right here among us, waiting for their chance to make a difference. All we have to do is ask. The years that followed saw Emma's Guardian Angels program spread far beyond the borders of Cedar Falls. What had started as a simple idea in a middle school had grown into a national movement, with chapters in schools across the country. Emma's story, the story of a little girl with bruises who found an army of protectors, became an inspiration to thousands. At 16, Emma was invited to speak at a national conference on child welfare. She stood before an audience of social workers, teachers, law enforcement officers, and community leaders, and she told her story with a power and grace that left everyone in the room moved. "When I was 7 years old, I didn't know that what was happening to me was wrong," she said. "I thought that was just how life was. I thought I deserved it. But then a logger named Marcus Thompson stopped his truck and asked if I was okay. And that one small act of kindness changed everything." She paused, letting her words sink in. We talk a lot about systemic solutions to child abuse. We talk about laws and regulations and funding, and those things are important. But what saved me wasn't a system. It was a person. It was one man who saw a frightened little girl and refused to look away. And then it was 40 people, an entire community, who rallied around me and made sure I was safe. Her voice grew stronger. We need systems, yes, but we also need people. We need individuals who are willing to be uncomfortable, who are willing to get involved, who are willing to be guardian angels for the children who need them. Because every child deserves to be seen, every child deserves to be protected, and every one of us has the power to make that happen. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. After the conference, Emma called Marcus from her hotel room. "I wish you could have been here," she said. "I watched the live stream," he told her, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma, I am so proud of you. Your mom would be proud of you too. Both Sarahs would be." She laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that reminded him of how far she had come. "I'm coming home next week. Can we do an adventure day? I miss the forest." "Sweetheart, I will clear my schedule. Nothing could keep me away." When she returned to Cedar Falls, the town threw her a welcome home party. At 33, Marcus was now the foreman of the largest logging operation in the county, but he still made time for the community that meant so much to him. Danny had become his business partner, and their crew had grown to nearly 60 men and women, all of whom knew the story of Emma Gibson and the night the loggers had come to her rescue. Rosie's Diner was the venue for the party, of course. At 70, Rosie was still running the place, though her granddaughter now did most of the cooking. The walls were covered with photographs from the past 9 years, documenting Emma's journey from a frightened 7-year-old to a confident 16-year-old who was changing the world. "I still remember the first time you walked in here," Rosie said, hugging Emma tightly. "You were so small, so scared. And now look at you, a force of nature." "I learned from the best," Emma said, glancing at Marcus. The party was a joyous affair, full of laughter and stories, and the kind of warmth that can only come from deep, genuine connection. Wayne was there, now 7 years sober, working as a counselor at the same rehabilitation facility that had saved his life. Dorothy and Harold Patterson were there, still foster parents, having opened their home to 6 more children over the years. The loggers were there, of course, along with their families, filling the diner with the boisterous energy that was their trademark. At one point, Big Pete raised his glass and called for everyone's attention. "I want to make a toast," he said, his deep voice carrying through the room. "To Emma Gibson, the bravest person I know." "To Emma," the crowd echoed. But Emma raised her own glass and shook her head. "No," she said, "to all of you, to the guardian angels of Cedar Falls. You saved my life, and you taught me what it means to be part of a community. This toast is for you." "To the guardian angels," they all shouted, and the cheer could be heard all the way out to the forest. Later that evening, Marcus and Emma slipped away from the party and walked to the park, to the wooden sculpture that had stood there for 9 years. The 40 smaller trees had weathered beautifully, their surfaces smooth and grey, but the central tree still stood tall, and the little wooden angel still perched at its top. "I think about her sometimes," Emma said, looking up at the angel. "My mom, I mean. I try to remember her face, her voice, but it gets harder every year." Marcus nodded. "I understand. The same thing happens to me with my Sarah." "Do you think she'd be happy, my mom, I mean, with how things turned out?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I think she would be more than happy. I think she would be amazed. You've taken the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into a mission to help others. That's not something everyone can do, Emma. That takes courage and strength and a kind of grace that most people never find." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm still that scared little girl, sitting on the porch in the rain. Like all of this, the speeches, the program, the confidence. It's just a mask I wear. And underneath, I'm still waiting for something bad to happen." Marcus turned to face her. "Emma, listen to me. That scared little girl is part of you, and she always will be. But she's not the whole story. You've grown, you've healed, you've become someone extraordinary. The fear doesn't define you, your courage does." He put his arm around her shoulders, and no matter what happens, no matter where life takes you, you will never be alone. You have a whole town of guardian angels watching over you. You have your dad, who has fought every day to become the father you deserve. And you have me. Emma leaned into him, and they stood there in the fading light, looking up at the angel who watched over Cedar Falls. "I love you, Marcus," she said. "You know that, right?" "I know I love you too, sweetheart, more than I could ever say." The night settled around them, peaceful and still. The stars came out one by one, and somewhere in the forest an owl began its evening call. And in that moment, everything was perfect. Because this is what community means. This is what love looks like. This is what happens when ordinary people choose to be guardian angels for those who need them most. It starts with one person, noticing, caring, refusing to look away. And then it grows, spreading outward like ripples in a pond, touching lives that will touch other lives, creating a chain of kindness that has no end. Emma Gibson had been saved by a logger who stopped his truck on a rainy day, and she had taken that salvation and multiplied it 1,000-fold, proving that every act of kindness matters, every moment of courage makes a difference, every guardian angel changes the world. The story of Cedar Falls, Oregon, would be told for generations. It would inspire other communities to come together, other individuals to step up, other ordinary people to become extraordinary. And it all started with 2 whispered words from a little girl with bruises on her arms. "Protect me." 40 loggers had answered that call, and in doing so, they had shown the world what humanity could be at its best. Not superheroes with capes and powers, just regular people with big hearts and the courage to act. Guardian angels, every one of them. And that is the most beautiful story of all. As Emma grew older, she never forgot the lessons she learned in Cedar Falls. She went on to college, studying social work, determined to spend her life helping children who were in the situation she had once been in. She interned at Child Protective Services, worked at a group home for foster children, and eventually earned her master's degree in public policy with a focus on child welfare. But no matter how far she traveled or how much she accomplished, she always came home to Cedar Falls. Every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, every community day, she was there, surrounded by the people who had become her family. Marcus aged gracefully, his hair turning silver, his face growing more weathered, but his spirit remaining as strong as ever. He eventually retired from logging, but he stayed active in the community, mentoring young people, volunteering at local charities, and always being there for Emma. Their relationship had evolved over the years from protector and protected to something deeper, something harder to define. He wasn't her father, though Wayne had fully stepped into that role and done it beautifully. He wasn't her grandfather, though he loved her as fiercely as any grandparent could. He was something uniquely theirs, a guardian angel who had become a permanent part of her life. When Emma got married at 28, it was Marcus who walked her down the aisle, right alongside Wayne. Her husband, a kind-hearted pediatrician named James, had grown up in Cedar Falls himself and had known Emma's story since childhood. He had been one of the first volunteers in her Guardian Angels program, and their friendship had slowly blossomed into love. "You're getting a good one," Marcus told James on the wedding day. "The best, actually. Take care of her." "I will," James promised. "But I have a feeling she'll be taking care of me just as much." The wedding was held in the forest clearing where Marcus had once married his own Sarah. The trees stood as silent witnesses, their branches forming a natural cathedral above the gathered guests. Emma wore a simple white dress, and in her bouquet she carried wildflowers and a small wooden angel, a replica of the one that stood in the park. "She's beautiful," Wayne said, standing beside Marcus as they watched Emma and James exchange their vows. "She always was," Marcus replied. When the ceremony was over and the celebration began, Emma found a quiet moment to speak with Marcus alone. They walked to the edge of the clearing, looking out over the mountains that had been the backdrop of her healing. "I've been thinking a lot about the past," Emma said, "about everything that happened, and I realized something." "What's that?" "When I was a little girl, I thought I was broken. I thought what was happening to me had damaged me beyond repair, but it didn't. It made me who I am. It gave me my purpose, my passion, my mission, and I have you to thank for that." She took his weathered hand in hers. "If you hadn't stopped that day, if you hadn't listened when I whispered those words, I don't know where I'd be. Maybe nowhere. But instead, I'm here, married to a wonderful man, about to start a family, doing work that I love. And it's all because one person decided to care." Marcus blinked back tears. "Emma, Shh," she said gently. "I just need you to know. You changed my life. You saved my life. And whatever time we have left together, I'm going to spend it making sure you know how much you mean to me." They hugged there at the edge of the forest as the sun set behind the mountains, and the wedding guests danced and laughed in the clearing behind them. And Marcus thought, as he often did, about the strange and beautiful path that had brought them to this moment. A lonely logger, still grieving his wife, had seen a frightened child and decided to help, and that one decision had rippled outward, touching lives, changing destinies, creating a legacy that would endure long after they were all gone. This is what it means to be human. Not perfect, not always knowing the right thing to do, but trying anyway, reaching out when it would be easier to walk away, believing in second chances and redemption and the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Marcus Thompson had never considered himself a hero. He was just a man who had done what any decent person should do. But in Emma's eyes and in the eyes of everyone in Cedar Falls, he was something more. He was proof that guardian angels are real, that they walk among us every day, waiting for their chance to make a difference. All we have to do is recognize them. All we have to do is become one. 2 years after her wedding, Emma gave birth to her first child, a daughter she named Sarah, after the 2 women who had shaped her life without ever meeting her. Little Sarah had her mother's eyes and her father's gentle spirit, and from the moment she was born, she was surrounded by more love than any child could ever need. Marcus was there in the hospital waiting room when she arrived, along with Wayne, Dorothy, Harold, Rosie, Danny, and half the town of Cedar Falls, it seemed. When Emma emerged from the delivery room, glowing with exhaustion and joy, she placed little Sarah in Marcus's arms. "Meet your granddaughter," she said. Marcus looked down at the tiny face, the perfect rosebud mouth, the eyes that were already showing hints of the brown they would become, and he felt his heart crack open in the best possible way. "Hey there, little one," he whispered. "I'm your Grandpa Marcus, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life watching over you, just like I watched over your mama." The baby yawned and snuggled deeper into his arms, and Marcus knew with absolute certainty that this was what his life had been building toward. All the loss, all the grief, all the years of loneliness, they had led him to this moment, to this family, to this purpose. He had thought after Sarah died that his story was essentially over, that he would live out his days in quiet solitude, going through the motions until it was his turn to join her. But then a little girl with bruises had whispered 2 words, and everything had changed. He had found a daughter in Emma, a community in Cedar Falls, a purpose that gave his life meaning. And now, holding his granddaughter in his arms, he understood that the story wasn't over. It was still being written, with every passing day, with every act of kindness, with every moment of connection. This is the truth that Marcus Thompson learned, the truth that Emma Gibson lived, the truth that the people of Cedar Falls embodied. We are all connected, every one of us, and when we choose to see each other, to help each other, to protect each other, we create something beautiful, something lasting, something that transcends our individual lives and becomes part of the great tapestry of human experience. Guardian angels are real. They're not in the sky. They're right here, all around us. They're the teachers who notice when a student is struggling. They're the neighbors who check in on the elderly widow down the street. They're the strangers who stop to help when someone's car breaks down. They're the friends who listen without judgment. The family members who offer unconditional love. The community members who refuse to look the other way. They're the 40 loggers who answered a little girl's plea for protection. They're all of us, every time we choose kindness over indifference, courage over fear, love over apathy. And that is the most powerful force in the world. Little Sarah grew up hearing stories of her mother's childhood, of the bruises and the fear, but also of the community that had rallied to save her. She grew up knowing that her grandpa Marcus had once been a stranger who became a hero, that her grandpa Wayne had once been a broken man who found redemption, that her entire town was built on a foundation of love and mutual support. And when she was old enough to understand, Emma took her to the park, to the wooden sculpture with its 40 trees and its little angel at the top. "This is where it all began," Emma said. "This is where our community showed me what they were made of." Sarah looked up at the angel, weathered now but still standing proud. "And that's why we take care of each other? Because they took care of you?" "That's exactly right. When someone showed me kindness in my darkest moment, it changed my whole life, and now I try to do the same for others. And someday, you'll do the same. That's how we keep the circle going." Sarah nodded solemnly, her young face serious with understanding. "I want to be a guardian angel too, Mommy." Emma knelt down and hugged her daughter tight. "You already are, sweetheart, you already are." And the angel watched over them, as it had watched over so many others, a symbol of what ordinary people could accomplish when they chose to be extraordinary. This is the story of Cedar Falls, Oregon, a story of pain and healing, of brokenness and redemption, of fear and courage. It's a story about a little girl who whispered, "Protect me," to a stranger, and about the 40 people who answered her call. But more than that, it's a story about all of us, about the choices we make every day, the opportunities we have to make a difference, the power we possess to be someone's guardian angel. Because you never know when your kindness might change a life. You never know when your courage might save a soul. You never know when your willingness to see, to listen, to act might become the beginning of something beautiful. So keep your eyes open, keep your hearts ready, and when someone whispers those 2 words, whether out loud or in the silent language of pain, don't walk away. Be the guardian angel they need. The world is waiting for you. And that is how this story ends, not with a final chapter, but with an invitation, a challenge, a hope. Because the story of Cedar Falls isn't really about one town or one logging crew or one little girl. It's about the best of what we can be when we come together. It's about the miracles that happen every day when ordinary people choose love over indifference. It's about you. What will you do with the power you have? Whose life will you change? Whose call will you answer? The little girl is out there waiting. The bruises may be visible or they may be hidden. The whisper may be audible or it may be silent. But the need is real, and the opportunity is yours. Be a guardian angel. It's the most important thing any of us can ever do. And when you do, When you answer that call, when you step up and step in and refuse to look away, you become part of a legacy that stretches back through time and forward into eternity. You become part of the story, and there is no greater honor than that. Thank you for listening to this story. Thank you for caring. Thank you for being the kind of person who watches videos like this, who believes in the goodness of humanity, who wants to make the world a better place. You are the guardian angel someone is waiting for. Go find them. Marcus Thompson passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 71, surrounded by the people who loved him. Emma was holding his hand when he took his last breath, and she swore later that she saw a smile on his face in those final moments, as if he was seeing something beautiful that the rest of them couldn't. The funeral was the largest Cedar Falls had ever seen. People came from all over the country, former logging crew members who had moved away, children now grown who had been helped by Emma's Guardian Angels program, strangers whose lives had been touched by the story of the 40 loggers and the little girl they had saved. Emma delivered the eulogy, standing before the crowd with tears streaming down her face, but her voice strong and clear. Marcus Thompson taught me that heroes don't wear capes, she said. They wear flannel shirts and work boots. They have calloused hands and weather-beaten faces. They show up day after day, doing the hard work, asking for nothing in return. And when they see someone in need, they don't think twice. They just act. She paused, looking at the photograph of Marcus that sat beside his casket, that familiar face with those kind eyes and that gentle smile. He saved my life when I was 7 years old, but more than that, he taught me how to live. He showed me what it means to be part of a community. He demonstrated every single day that love is not just a feeling, it's a choice to show up, a choice to care, a choice to be the guardian angel someone is waiting for. Her voice broke slightly, but she pressed on. I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will honor him too. I will honor him by continuing the work he started, by being the kind of person he was, by teaching my daughter and anyone else who will listen that ordinary people have extraordinary power. She looked out at the crowd, at the faces of the community that had shaped her, and she felt her heart swell with gratitude and determination. Marcus Thompson once told me that guardian angels are real, that they're not in the sky, they're right here among us. Looking at all of you today, I know he was right. You are the guardian angels, every single one of you, and together we will carry his legacy forward. She stepped back from the podium, and the crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of the church. And somewhere, Emma was sure Marcus was watching, and he was smiling. After the funeral, the town gathered at Rosie's diner, which had been passed down to Rosie's granddaughter, but still bore the same name and served the same legendary pie. Stories were shared, laughter mixed with tears, and the spirit of community that had defined Cedar Falls for over a century was stronger than ever. Emma sat at the counter, the same counter where she had once sat as a frightened little girl with a glass of milk and a piece of pie. So much had changed since then. She had grown up, found love, had a child of her own. And yet, in some ways, everything was exactly the same. The warmth of the diner, the kindness of the people around her, the knowledge that she was never, ever alone. Her daughter Sarah, now 5 years old, climbed up onto the stool beside her. "Mommy, why is everyone crying but also laughing?" Emma smiled and pulled her daughter close. "Because that's what happens when we lose someone we love, sweetheart. We're sad because we miss them, but we're happy because of all the wonderful memories we have. And when we share those memories with each other, it helps. It makes the sad parts easier to bear." Sarah considered this. "Do you have happy memories of Grandpa Marcus?" "So many, baby, so many." "Will you tell me one?" Emma thought for a moment, then smiled. "When I was your age, Grandpa Marcus used to take me on adventure days. We would go hiking in the mountains, and he would teach me the names of all the trees and birds. One time we found a little waterfall that nobody else knew about. He called it our secret place. And he told me that whenever I felt sad or scared, I should close my eyes and imagine myself there by the waterfall and remember that I was never alone." Sarah's eyes were wide. "Can we go there, Mummy? Can you show me?" "I would love that, sweetheart. We'll make it our secret place too." Sarah grinned, that beautiful smile that reminded Emma so much of the hope she had found all those years ago. "And someday I'll show my kids?" "That's exactly right. That's how we keep the people we love alive. We pass on their stories, their lessons, their love." Sarah snuggled against her mother, and Emma held her tight, surrounded by the community that had raised her, mourning the man who had saved her, and knowing with absolute certainty that the legacy of Cedar Falls would endure. Because that's what guardian angels do. They don't just protect us in the moment, they teach us how to protect others. They show us what it means to be part of something larger than ourselves. They plant seeds that grow into forests, creating shade for generations yet to come. Marcus Thompson was gone, but his spirit lived on in every act of kindness performed by the people he had inspired, in Emma's ongoing work with abused children, in Sarah's innocent declaration that she wanted to be a guardian angel too, in the 40 aging loggers who still drove their trucks past houses where children might need to know they weren't alone. This is the true meaning of legacy, not what we accumulate, but what we give away, not what we achieve for ourselves, but what we make possible for others, not the monuments we build, but the love we leave behind. And in Cedar Falls, Oregon, that love was everywhere. It was in the wooden sculpture in the park, the one with 40 trees and a little angel at the top. It was in the walls of Rosie's diner, soaked with decades of conversations and connections. It was in the forest itself, the great pines that had witnessed so much human drama and had stood as silent guardians through it all. It was in the hearts of every person who had heard Emma's story and been moved to action, in the thousands of children who had been helped by the Guardian Angels program, in the communities across the country that had been inspired to come together and protect their most vulnerable members. It was in you, the person listening to this story right now, because by hearing these words, by letting them into your heart, you become part of the legacy too. You carry the message forward. You look at the people around you with new eyes, wondering if any of them might be whispering for help. You make the choice to be a guardian angel, even in small ways, even in moments that seem insignificant. Because no moment is insignificant, no act of kindness is too small. Every time we choose to see, to listen, to act, we change the world. We become links in a chain of love that stretches back through time and forward into eternity. Marcus Thompson understood this. Emma Gibson lives it, and now so do you. The little girl with bruises whispered, "Protect me," to a lumberjack, and 40 of them showed up at her house. That's not just a story. That's a roadmap for how to be human. That's a blueprint for building the kind of world we all want to live in. That's a promise that no matter how dark things get, there is always light waiting to break through. Be that light. Be a guardian angel. And know that somewhere, in a little town called Cedar Falls, there's a community cheering you on. Because we're all connected, we're all in this together. And when we look out for each other, when we refuse to let the vulnerable suffer alone, when we answer the whispered cries for help, we become something greater than ourselves. We become the best version of humanity. And there is nothing more beautiful than that. This story is dedicated to every guardian angel out there, known and unknown, celebrated and anonymous, to the teachers and counselors and social workers, to the neighbors and friends and family members, to the strangers who stop to help and the loved ones who stay through the hard times. And especially to the children who are still waiting for their guardian angel to appear. Hold on, have hope, help is coming. Because in this world, in this beautiful, broken, complicated world, there are still people like Marcus Thompson, people who will stop their trucks on rainy days, people who will listen when you whisper, people who will gather 40 of their closest friends and show up at your door, not to threaten or intimidate, but simply to say, "We see you, we care, we will not let you face this alone." Those people are out there, and one of them might be reading this right now. One of them might be you. So go, be the guardian angel, answer the call. The little girl is waiting, and she needs you. 10 years after Marcus Thompson's passing, Cedar Falls had transformed in many ways, yet remained fundamentally the same. The logging industry had evolved with the times, adopting sustainable practices that Marcus himself had championed in his later years. New families had moved to town, drawn by the reputation of a community that truly cared for its own. And the Guardian Angels program, now a nationally recognized non-profit organization, had its headquarters right there on Main Street, in a building that had once been an old hardware store. Emma Gibson Reynolds, now in her late 30s, served as the executive director. Her office was modest but meaningful, its walls covered with photographs and letters from children and families whose lives had been touched by the program. There was a photograph of her at 7 years old, standing between Marcus and the Pattersons on that first community day. There was the original drawing she had made for Marcus, the stick figure man surrounded by trees, and there was a framed copy of the plaque from the wooden sculpture in the park, the one that still stood tall after all these years. Her father, Wayne, had become one of the program's most powerful advocates. Now in his 60s, sober for over 20 years, he traveled around the country sharing his story with other struggling parents. He spoke with brutal honesty about his darkest days, about the demons that had driven him to hurt the person he loved most. But he also spoke about redemption, about the possibility of change, about the community that had refused to give up on him even when he had given up on himself. "I was the monster," he would tell audiences, his voice steady and clear. "I was the thing that children needed to be protected from, and if I can change, if I can become someone worthy of my daughter's love, then anyone can. But it takes work, it takes support. It takes a community that believes in second chances." His relationship with Emma had healed completely over the years. The scars would always be there, of course, the memories of those dark days when she had been so afraid. But they had been transformed, woven into a story of survival and redemption that gave hope to others. And Emma had come to understand something profound about her father, that he had been broken too, that his actions had come from a place of unspeakable pain, and that his journey back to wholeness had been just as difficult as her own. "I forgave him a long time ago," Emma often said when asked about their relationship, "not because what he did was okay, it wasn't, but because holding on to that anger was hurting me more than it was hurting him. And because I learned from Marcus and from this community that people are not defined by their worst moments. We are defined by what we do next." Little Sarah, now 15, had inherited her mother's passion for helping others. She volunteered at the Guardian Angels office every weekend, helping to train new peer counselors and organize community events. She had her mother's eyes and her grandmother's name, and she carried the legacy of Cedar Falls with a pride and purpose that made everyone who knew her smile. "Grandpa Marcus would be so proud of you," Emma told her one evening as they locked up the office together. Sarah smiled, that same brilliant smile that had always reminded Emma of hope. I feel like he is, Mom. Like he's still watching over us, you know? Like all the guardian angels we've lost are still part of this somehow. Emma pulled her daughter close. I believe that too, sweetheart. I really do. They walked home together through the streets of Cedar Falls, past Rosie's diner, where the lights were just coming on for the dinner rush, past the hardware store bench, where a new generation of old men solved the world's problems, past the park with its wooden sculpture and its little angel standing watch. The town had grown and changed, but its heart remained the same. New loggers had joined the crews, young men and women who learned the story of the 40 guardian angels as part of their training. New families had put down roots, drawn by a reputation for community that was as strong as the pines that surrounded them. And new children had been protected, identified, and helped before their situations could spiral into crisis, because the people of Cedar Falls never stopped watching, never stopped caring, never looked away. This was Marcus Thompson's true legacy. Not the trees he had felled or the lumber he had produced, but the culture of compassion he had helped to create. A culture where neighbors knew each other's names, where children were everyone's responsibility, where no one suffered alone if the community could help it. And it had all started with one man, one little girl, and 2 whispered words. Protect me. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Somewhere in the forest, an owl called out, and another answered. The stars began to appear, one by one, like guardian angels taking their positions for the night watch. Emma and Sarah reached their home, a comfortable house on Maple Street, just a few doors down from where Emma had once huddled on a porch in the rain. She had bought the house deliberately years ago, wanting to transform a place of pain into a place of healing. And she had succeeded. The house was now filled with love and laughter, with the sounds of family and the warmth of belonging. James met them at the door, their 12-year-old son, Marcus Jr., close behind. They had named him after the man who had saved Emma's life, and he had inherited not just the name, but the spirit. A boy with a gentle heart and a fierce protectiveness for those who were smaller or weaker than himself. "How was work?" James asked, kissing Emma on the cheek. "Good, really good. We got approval for 3 new school chapters today, and Sarah was amazing with the new volunteers." Sarah blushed. "I just told them what Grandpa Marcus would have wanted, that being a guardian angel isn't about being perfect, it's about being present." Marcus Jr. nodded seriously. "That's what Dad always says about being a doctor. Show up, pay attention, care." Emma looked at her family, these beautiful people who were her whole world, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from that terrified child on the porch to this woman surrounded by love. She thought about all the guardian angels along the way, the ones who had seen her, saved her, shaped her into who she had become. And she made a silent promise, as she did every night, to honor their legacy by being a guardian angel for others. Because that's how the circle continued. That's how the light spread. That's how the story that had begun with one logger and one little girl became a story about all of humanity. We are all capable of extraordinary kindness. We are all capable of seeing the invisible, hearing the silent, protecting the vulnerable. We are all capable of being the guardian angel someone desperately needs. The only question is whether we will choose to act. The people of Cedar Falls had made their choice 20 years ago, on a rainy evening when 40 trucks rumbled down Maple Street. And they had been making that choice every day since, in ways large and small, visible and invisible. They had proven that communities can heal what individuals cannot, that love is stronger than fear, that redemption is always possible for those who seek it. And they had proven that guardian angels are real. They don't have wings. They don't glow with divine light. They are ordinary people with ordinary lives who make the extraordinary choice to care. They are Marcus Thompson, stopping his truck on a rainy day. They are the 40 loggers driving past a little girl's house. They are Rosie serving pie and love in equal measure. They are Dorothy and Harold Patterson opening their home to a frightened child. They are Wayne Gibson fighting every day to be the father he should have been all along. They are Emma taking her pain and transforming it into purpose. They are Sarah and Marcus Jr. carrying the legacy forward into the next generation. And they are you reading this story, feeling something stir in your heart, wondering if maybe, just maybe, you have the power to be someone's guardian angel too. You do. You absolutely do. So pay attention, look around you, notice the little girl at the bus stop, the neighbor who always seems tired, the co-worker who jokes to hide their pain. Notice the invisible people, the ones who have learned to make themselves small. And when you see them, don't look away. Stop your truck, ask if they're okay. Listen when they whisper. Be the guardian angel they've been waiting for. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. It might be the most important thing you ever do. It will certainly be the most human thing you ever do. Because this is what we were made for. Not success or achievement or accumulation, but connection. Not independence and self-sufficiency, but interdependence and mutual care. Not isolation and individualism, but community and love. We need each other. All of us, and when we remember that, when we act on that truth, miracles happen. Broken children are healed, broken parents are redeemed, broken communities are made whole. And the world becomes, little by little, the place it was always meant to be. A place where no one suffers alone. A place where every child is protected. A place where guardian angels are everywhere you look. This is the vision that Marcus Thompson embodied. This is the legacy that Cedar Falls carries forward. This is the story that continues to unfold with every act of kindness, every moment of courage, every choice to love instead of fear. It is a story without end because it is the story of humanity itself. And you are part of it. You have always been part of it. The only question is what chapter you will write. So write a good one, write a brave one, write a chapter filled with guardian angels and rescued children and communities transformed. Write the chapter that Marcus Thompson would be proud of. Write the chapter that honors every child who has ever whispered, "Protect me," and been heard. Write the chapter that proves once and for all that ordinary people have extraordinary power. The pen is in your hand, the page is blank and waiting. What will you write? The people of Cedar Falls know the answer. They have been writing it for generations, in the lumber they harvest, and the pies they bake, and the children they protect. And now it's your turn. Be a guardian angel. Change the world, one child, one family, one community at a time. This is how the story continues. This is how the light spreads. This is how we become, together, the best version of what humanity can be. And there is no greater story than that.